Ryan was the kind of person who liked things predictable. Every Tuesday after work, same routine. Stop at the coffee shop on Miller Street, order a black coffee, sit by the window, watch people pass by for about 30 minutes, then head home. It wasn't exciting, but it was his routine, and routines made him feel safe. That Tuesday started like any other. He left his office building at exactly 5:30, walked the same 6 blocks he always did, and pushed open the glass door of the coffee shop. But something was different today. The place was packed. Rain had started pouring out of nowhere, and everyone had rushed inside for shelter. Ryan looked around. Every table was taken. People were standing against the walls, scrolling through their phones, waiting for the storm to pass. He considered leaving, but he'd already been thinking about that coffee for the last hour. So he squeezed through the crowd and spotted one empty chair at a tiny table in the back corner. Without thinking twice, he headed straight for it. He sat down, pulled out his phone, and took that first sip of coffee. Perfect temperature. He let out a small sigh of relief. Finally, a moment of peace in this chaotic day. Then she appeared. He didn't hear her walk up, didn't notice her standing there. 1 second he was alone, and the next second there was a woman sitting right across from him. Just like that. No asking permission, no apologetic smile. She just sat down and looked at him with this bold, almost playful expression on her face. Ryan froze with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. He glanced around, thinking maybe she was meeting someone and had confused him for her friend. But no, her eyes were locked on him. And then she smiled. Not a polite smile. Not an awkward smile. A knowing smile. "I've been looking for you," she said. Ryan blinked. He set his coffee down slowly, buying himself a second to process what was happening. Was this some kind of joke, a prank? He looked around again, half expecting to see someone with a camera. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "Do I know you?" She tilted her head slightly, still smiling. "You really don't remember, do you?" "Remember what?" Ryan's mind raced through every face he'd ever known. Co-workers, old classmates, friends of friends, that girl from the gym who always said hello. Nothing. He'd never seen this woman before in his life. He was absolutely sure of it. "I think you might have me confused with someone else," he said, trying to be polite but firm. She laughed. Not a mean laugh, but genuine, like he'd just said something funny. Then she leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. "So how did that presentation go last week? The one about the marketing strategy for the new product line?" Ryan felt his stomach drop. He'd given that presentation 8 days ago, to a closed room of senior managers. How could she possibly know about that? What? He managed to say. "The presentation," she repeated, still smiling. "You were worried about it. You practiced it like 20 times. But it went really well, didn't it? Mr. Henderson even complimented you afterward. This wasn't possible." Ryan stared at her, his mind trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe she worked in his building, but he'd never seen her there. Maybe she knew someone who worked with him. But why would they tell her about his presentation? "Who are you?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "My name is Natasha," she said simply. "And you're Ryan Chen. You work at Bridgewater Solutions on the 4th floor. You live in apartment 812 at the Cedar Grove complex. You have a small scar on your left knee from when you fell off your bike when you were 9, and every Sunday morning you walk through Henderson Park, always taking the path by the lake, never the one through the woods." Ryan felt cold. Everything she just said was true. Every single detail. But that was impossible. He didn't know this woman. He'd never told anyone about that bike accident except his family. And how did she know his apartment number? His walking route? "Have you been following me?" he asked, and he could hear the edge in his own voice. Natasha's smile faded just a little. She looked almost sad for a moment. "No, Ryan, it's not like that. We know each other. We've known each other for a long time." "That's not true," Ryan said firmly. "I've never seen you before." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, and then she turned it toward him. "Then explain this." Ryan looked at the screen. It was a photograph. A beach, sunset, golden light everywhere. And in the photo, 2 people stood together, arms around each other, smiling at the camera. One of them was clearly Natasha. The other one was him. Ryan grabbed the phone from her hand, bringing it closer to his face. That was definitely him. Same face, same build. He was even wearing that blue jacket he bought last year. But he had no memory of this. None at all. He'd never been to that beach. He'd never taken this photo. Where did you get this? He demanded. I didn't get it anywhere, Natasha said quietly. We took it together. 3 months ago. We drove up the coast for the weekend. You said you needed to get away from everything for a while. Don't you remember? 3 months ago. Ryan tried to think back. May. What had he been doing in May? Working mostly. A couple of dinners with friends. Nothing unusual. Definitely no beach trip. He would remember a beach trip. This is fake, he said, shoving the phone back across the table. I don't know how you did this, but it's fake. Photoshop or something. Natasha took her phone back, and for the first time she looked hurt. Really hurt. Why would I fake this? I don't know, Ryan said, standing up. Maybe you're some kind of stalker. Maybe you're trying to scam me. Maybe you're just crazy. But I'm leaving. He grabbed his coffee and turned to walk away, his heart pounding. This was insane. Completely insane. He needed to get out of here, go home, lock his door, and maybe call the police. Ryan, wait. He stopped but didn't turn around. You had an accident, Natasha said, and her voice was different now, serious, almost pleading. 2 years ago. A car accident. You hit your head really badly. The doctor said you might have memory problems. Don't you remember that? Ryan's hand tightened around his coffee cup. The accident. He did remember the accident. It had been bad. Really bad. He'd been in the hospital for a week. The recovery had taken months. But the doctors said he was fine. They said everything was fine. He turned around slowly. Natasha was still sitting there, looking up at him with those same knowing eyes. That accident changed things, she said softly. It changed you. There are things you don't remember. People you don't remember. And I'm one of them. Ryan wanted to leave. Every instinct told him to walk out that door and never look back. But something stopped him. Some tiny doubt creeping into the back of his mind. What if she was telling the truth? What if there were gaps in his memory he'd never noticed? He sat back down. Tell me everything, he said, and Natasha started talking. The next week was the strangest week of Ryan's life. Natasha started showing up everywhere. At first, he thought it was coincidence. On Wednesday, he saw her at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, picking up apples, and when she saw him, she waved like it was the most natural thing in the world. On Friday, she was sitting on a bench outside his office building when he left for lunch. She didn't approach him, just sat there watching. When their eyes met, she smiled and then looked away, like she was giving him space to process everything. On Sunday morning, he went for his usual walk in Henderson Park. He was halfway around the lake when he spotted her ahead on the path, feeding breadcrumbs to the ducks. This time he walked up to her. Are you following me? He asked. She looked up, genuinely surprised to see him. Or at least she looked surprised. No, I come here every Sunday. I always have. That's my routine, Ryan said. I walk here every Sunday morning. I know, Natasha replied. That's where we first met. Right here. You were watching the ducks and I asked you what time it was. You said you didn't wear a watch because you liked not knowing sometimes. We ended up talking for 2 hours. Ryan had no memory of this. None. He walked this path every single Sunday and he was sure he would remember meeting someone here. But Natasha said it with such certainty, such detail that it made him doubt himself. They walked together that morning. She talked about places they'd supposedly been. A small Italian restaurant downtown where they'd celebrated something, a movie theater where they'd watched some action film he couldn't stand, a bookstore where he'd bought her a poetry collection. Ryan listened, trying to find any spark of recognition. Nothing came. But here was the strange part. Natasha knew things. Small things. Personal things. She knew he always ordered extra sauce on his burgers. She knew he had a weird habit of organizing his desk in a specific way before he could start working. She knew he couldn't stand the sound of people chewing loudly. How did she know these things? That night, Ryan called his best friend, Tom. They'd known each other since college. If anyone could give him a reality check, it was Tom. So let me get this straight, Tom said over the phone. This woman says you dated her, but you don't remember her at all? Yeah, Ryan said. And she knows things about me. Personal things. Dude, she's probably been stalking your social media. People can find out a lot about you online. But she has photos, Tom. Photos of us together. And they look real. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's weird. Have you tried reverse image searching them? Maybe she grabbed your photos from somewhere and edited herself in. Ryan hadn't thought of that. How do I do that? Send me the photos. I'll check them out. Ryan texted the beach photo to Tom and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, his phone rang again. Okay, this is strange, Tom said. I can't find this photo anywhere online. It's not posted on any website or social media. If she faked it, she did a really good job. So what do I do? I don't know, man. Maybe you should talk to a professional, like a therapist or something. Didn't you have that accident a couple years back? Maybe it affected your memory more than you thought. After hanging up, Ryan sat in his apartment staring at the wall. The accident. Everyone kept bringing up the accident. He remembered it clearly. Or did he? He remembered the crash itself. The sound of metal crunching. The airbag deploying. The hospital. The recovery. But what about after? What about those first few months after he got out of the hospital? He tried to think back. The memories felt fuzzy, incomplete. He'd assumed that was normal. People don't remember every single day of their lives. But what if there were bigger gaps than he'd realized? He opened his laptop and logged into his email. He searched for messages from 2 years ago, right after the accident. Work emails, doctor's appointments, normal stuff. Then he checked his calendar. Everything looked fine. Nothing unusual, but then he noticed something odd. In June of that year, there were multiple calendar entries that just said weekend plans or dinner out, with no other details. He clicked on them, but there was no additional information. Had he been seeing someone? Had he been spending time with Natasha? The next day, Monday morning, Ryan called his doctor's office. He asked if he could get copies of his medical records from the accident. They said they'd have them ready by the end of the week. Meanwhile, Natasha kept appearing. Tuesday at the coffee shop again. Wednesday at the park. Each time she'd share more memories, more details. And each time Ryan felt more confused. On Thursday evening, she called him. He was surprised she had his number, but at this point nothing should have surprised him. Meet me tomorrow night, she said. I want to show you something. Something that might help you understand. Understand what? Ryan asked. What we had. What you've forgotten. Please, Ryan. Just give me one more chance to help you remember. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to say no. This was crazy. This woman was either lying or delusional, and he needed to stay away from her. But that tiny doubt, that small voice in the back of his mind made him hesitate. Where? He finally asked. There's an old warehouse on the east side of town, Hamilton Street, number 42. Tomorrow at 7. I promise everything will make sense. She hung up before he could change his mind. Ryan sat there holding his phone, wondering what he'd just agreed to. A warehouse? That sounded like the beginning of a horror movie. But at the same time, he needed answers. He needed to know if what she was saying was true or if he was being played somehow. Friday came too quickly. Ryan went to work, tried to focus on his tasks, but his mind kept drifting. Should he go tonight? Should he tell someone where he was going? Should he just ignore the whole thing and block Natasha's number? At 6:30, he made his decision. He was going. But he wasn't going alone. He texted Tom the address and told him if he didn't hear from him by 9, to call the police. Tom replied with 3 question marks and a WTF are you doing? But agreed. Ryan drove across town as the sun set. Hamilton Street was in an industrial area. Old buildings, some abandoned, some converted into artist studios or storage facilities. Number 42 was a large brick warehouse with dusty windows and a faded sign that had once advertised furniture. He parked his car and sat there for a moment, engine still running. Last chance to turn around, last chance to walk away from this whole bizarre situation. But he didn't. He turned off the engine, got out, and walked toward the warehouse door. It was unlocked. He pushed it open and it creaked loudly in the silence. Inside, a single light bulb hung from the ceiling, illuminating a space filled with shadows. And there, in the middle of the room, stood Natasha. Thank you for coming, she said softly. Now let me show you the truth. The warehouse was cold and dusty. Ryan's footsteps echoed on the concrete floor as he walked inside. Natasha stood under the single light bulb, and as Ryan got closer, he could see that she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and she looked tired. Really tired. What is this place? Ryan asked, looking around at the empty space. This used to be yours, Natasha said. Well, not yours, but you rented it. You were working on a project. You wanted space away from your apartment to think and create. Create what? You were writing a book. About your life. About finding meaning after the accident. Ryan almost laughed. I'm not a writer. I work in marketing. You are now, Natasha said sadly. But you weren't always. The accident changed you, Ryan. It changed everything about who you were. She walked to the far wall, and that's when Ryan saw it. The entire wall was covered, photographs, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all pinned up in a massive collage. And in every single photo, Ryan saw himself. Himself with Natasha. Himself smiling, laughing, living a life he had no memory of. He walked closer, his heart pounding. There were pictures of them at restaurants, at concerts, at someone's wedding, on hiking trails, in what looked like his apartment, but decorated differently than how he decorated it now. Each photo looked genuine. The lighting was natural. The expressions were real. These weren't photoshopped. How? Ryan whispered. How is this possible? Natasha stood beside him, looking at the wall like it was a memorial. We were together for almost a year. We met at the park, just like I told you. You were different then, spontaneous, happy. You used to say that the accident gave you a second chance at life, and you weren't going to waste it following someone else's plan anymore. Ryan reached out and touched one of the photos, him and Natasha at a beach bonfire. He was holding a guitar. He didn't play guitar. He'd never played guitar in his life. That was the night you played music for the first time since high school, Natasha said, following his gaze. You said you'd forgotten how much you loved it. You borrowed that guitar from a friend and played for hours. I don't play guitar, Ryan said again, more to himself than to her. You did. You do. The guitar is still at your apartment, in the hall closet, blue case. Check when you get home. Ryan turned to look at her. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? I want you to remember, Natasha said, and her voice cracked. I want you to remember us. Remember who you were, because that person, the real you, is still in there somewhere, and I miss him. Ryan backed away from the wall, overwhelmed. This was too much. Way too much. I need to go. Wait. Natasha pulled out a small notebook from her bag. Take this. These are journal entries you wrote. About us, about everything. Maybe they'll help. Ryan looked at the notebook but didn't take it. How do I know you didn't write these yourself? Because they're in your handwriting, she said, holding it out to him. Please, just read them, and if you still don't believe me after that, I'll leave you alone. I promise. Against his better judgment, Ryan took the notebook. It was worn, the cover bent at the corners, pages slightly yellowed. He opened to a random page and immediately recognized his own handwriting. The messy scrawl he'd had since high school. The entry was dated from 18 months ago. It talked about meeting someone special. About feeling alive for the first time in years. About deciding to take risks and stop living in fear. The writing style sounded like him, but the thoughts, the emotions described felt foreign. I need time, Ryan said, closing the notebook. I need to figure this out. I understand, Natasha said, but please don't take too long, because there's something else you need to know. Something I haven't told you yet. What? She looked down at her hands. You asked me to marry you. 3 days before your second accident. Ryan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. My second accident? You don't remember that one either, Natasha said quietly. It was smaller. You hit your head again. Fell down some stairs at work. The doctor said it was like reopening an old wound. And after that you forgot everything about us. Forgot the person you'd become. Forgot the proposal, everything. Ryan stumbled backward until he hit the wall. This couldn't be real. None of this could be real. But Natasha's tears were real. The photos were real. The notebook in his hands felt real. I need to go, he said again, and this time he didn't wait for her response. He turned and walked out of the warehouse into the cool night air, his mind spinning. He sat in his car for 20 minutes before he could steady his hands enough to drive. When he finally got home, he went straight to the hall closet. He moved aside winter coats and old shoes, digging toward the back. And there it was. A blue guitar case. He pulled it out and opened it. Inside was an acoustic guitar, well used, with a small crack on the side. Taped to the inside of the case was a photo. Ryan and Natasha. He was holding this exact guitar, smiling at the camera while she kissed his cheek. Ryan closed the case and sat on his floor, the notebook beside him. For the next 4 hours he read every entry. Each one described a life he didn't remember living. Adventures he didn't remember taking. Feelings he didn't remember feeling. And the more he read, the more questions filled his mind. The next morning, exhausted and confused, Ryan picked up his medical records from the doctor's office. He spent the whole day reading through them. The first accident was well documented. Severe concussion, minor brain trauma, risk of memory issues, all things he knew. But then he found the second report. From 16 months ago, another head injury, another concussion. The doctor's notes mentioned personality regression and behavioral changes consistent with earlier brain function. They'd recommended therapy and regular follow-ups. But according to the records, Ryan had only gone to 2 sessions before stopping. He didn't remember any of this. Not the fall, not the hospital visit, not the therapy. Ryan called his sister Hannah. She lived 2 states away and they only talked every few months, but maybe she remembered something. "Hannah, did I ever mention a woman named Natasha to you?" There was a pause. "Natasha? Yeah, you talked about her all the time about a year and a half ago." "Why?" Ryan's heart started racing. "What did I say about her?" "You said you were in love, that you'd found someone who made you want to be better. You even said you were thinking about proposing. I was so happy for you, Ryan. But then after that accident at work, you just stopped mentioning her. When I asked about her, you acted like you didn't know who I was talking about. I figured you two had broken up and you didn't want to discuss it. Did you ever meet her?" "No, but you showed me pictures. She seemed nice. Made you smile? You hadn't smiled like that since the car accident." After hanging up, Ryan sat in silence. Everything Natasha had told him was true. All of it. He'd had another life, another version of himself, and he'd completely forgotten it. The question was, what was he going to do about it now? Ryan spent the next 3 days watching videos. Natasha had given him a flash drive before he left the warehouse, though he hadn't noticed it until he got home and found it tucked into the notebook. The drive contained dozens of video files, each one dated and labeled. The first video he watched was from a hiking trip. The camera was shaky, clearly handheld, and it showed Ryan climbing up a rocky trail. But this Ryan was different. He was laughing, talking to Natasha behind the camera about how beautiful the view was going to be. He looked relaxed, happy, free. "Come on, slowpoke," Video Ryan called out. "We're almost at the top." "I'm coming," Natasha's voice replied from behind the camera. Not all of us are part mountain goat. They reached the summit together and Video Ryan took the camera to film the landscape. Mountains stretching in every direction. A valley below filled with pine trees and a winding river. Then he turned the camera around to show both of them, their faces close together, both grinning. "This is it," Video Ryan said. "This is living. This is what life should be." Watching it, present day Ryan felt like he was looking at a stranger. That enthusiasm, that joy, that spontaneity. Where had it come from? And more importantly, where had it gone? He watched more videos. A birthday celebration where Video Ryan gave a toast, talking about how grateful he was for second chances and the people who made life worth living. A quiet evening at home where they cooked dinner together, laughing when Video Ryan accidentally burned the garlic bread. A road trip where they sang terribly to old songs on the radio. In every single video, Ryan saw the same thing. Someone who looked like him but acted completely different. Someone unafraid. Someone living fully. Someone he barely recognized. The last video was different from the others. It was filmed at night, just Video Ryan sitting alone talking to the camera. The date stamp showed it was from 2 days before his second accident. "I don't know why I'm recording this," Video Ryan said, looking tired but content. "Maybe I just want to remember this moment. This feeling. I asked Natasha to marry me today. She said yes. We're going to have a life together. A real life. Not the half-life I was living before." He paused, running his hand through his hair. "Sometimes I think about who I used to be. Before the first accident. So focused on work. So worried about doing everything right. Following all the rules. Playing it safe. That accident broke me open, and for the first time I could see how small I'd been living." Video Ryan leaned closer to the camera. "If you're watching this, future me, remember this feeling. Remember that being safe isn't the same as being alive. Remember that love is worth the risk. Remember Natasha. Remember how she makes you want to be braver." The video ended. Ryan sat there in his dark living room, tears streaming down his face. He'd been crying and hadn't even realized it. That man in the video had everything figured out. He'd found happiness, found love, found himself. And then in an instant, it was all erased. Ryan grabbed his phone and called Natasha. She answered on the second ring. I watched everything, he said. The videos. I read the journal. I talked to my sister. I believe you. He could hear her breathing on the other end like she was trying to compose herself. Thank you, she finally said. I need to know everything. The whole story. No more pieces. No more mysteries, everything. They met at a quiet diner on the edge of town. It was late, nearly midnight, and they were the only customers. Natasha ordered coffee. Ryan ordered nothing. He just wanted answers. She started from the beginning. How they met at the park. How he'd been so different from everyone else she'd ever dated. How he talked about his accident as if it had been a gift rather than a tragedy. How they fell in love slowly, naturally, over shared moments and long conversations. You said you felt like you'd been asleep your whole life and finally woke up, Natasha told him. You quit your job, started working freelance so you'd have more time for things that mattered. You started writing, playing music. We traveled. You said you wanted to experience everything you'd been too afraid to try before. Then what happened? Ryan asked. You went back to your old office to pick up some files you'd left behind. You were walking down the stairs talking on the phone with me and you slipped. Hit your head on the railing. It seemed like a minor thing at first. Just a bump. But when I saw you at the hospital the next day, you were different. Distant, confused. You didn't recognize me. Natasha wiped her eyes. The doctor said the second impact had somehow reversed some of the changes from the first accident. Your brain went back to old patterns, old pathways. You became the person you were before everything, before me, before all of it. Why didn't you tell me then? Why disappear? I tried, she said, her voice breaking. I tried so hard, but you looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was crazy. Your family thought I was making things worse. The doctor said pushing you to remember could cause more damage, so I left. I thought maybe with time you'd remember on your own, but you never did, so why come back now? Natasha looked down at her hands. Because I saw you. At that coffee shop. Sitting alone. Living the same routine you used to live before we met. And I realized you were gone. Really gone. The man I loved had disappeared and no one was even looking for him. I thought maybe if I could show you who you'd been, remind you of what you'd felt, maybe something would click. Ryan reached across the table and took her hand. She looked up surprised. I'm not that person anymore, he said gently. I want to be. Watching those videos, reading those journals, I want to be him so badly. But I'm not. I can't remember any of it. I can't feel what he felt. I know, Natasha whispered. I know, and I'm sorry for pushing. I'm sorry for trying to bring back someone who's gone. It wasn't fair to you. They sat in silence for a long time, the fluorescent lights humming above them, the tired waitress refilling coffee cups that no one was drinking. Two people mourning the same loss. A life that had existed but could never exist again. What do we do now? Ryan finally asked. Natasha shook her head. I don't know. I've been asking myself that question for over a year. Do you think, Ryan said slowly, carefully, that we could start over? Not try to recreate what was, but maybe build something new? Natasha looked at him with such sadness. I don't think I can do that. Because every time I look at you, I see him, the man I lost, and I don't know if I can separate who you are now from who you were then. That's fair, Ryan said, though his heart sank. But, Natasha continued, maybe you can take something from all this. Maybe knowing who you were can help you figure out who you want to be. It wasn't the answer Ryan wanted, but it was the answer he needed. For the next 2 weeks, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about the videos, about the journal entries, about the man he used to be. He'd go to work, sit at his desk, and stare at his computer screen without really seeing it. His coworkers started noticing. His boss asked if everything was okay. He said yes, even though it wasn't. The truth was, Ryan felt stuck between two versions of himself. The careful, routine-driven person he was now, and the adventurous, fearless person he'd apparently been. Which one was real? Which one was actually him? One night he drove to the warehouse again. Natasha had given him the key, told him he could go back whenever he wanted. The wall of photographs was still there, though some had fallen and lay scattered on the floor. He picked them up one by one, studying each image like they were clues to a mystery he needed to solve. In one photo, he was standing on a pier at sunset, arms spread wide, face tilted toward the sky. He looked completely at peace. In another, he was sitting at a piano in what looked like a friend's house, completely focused on the keys. In a third, he and Natasha were dancing in someone's living room, both of them laughing. Ryan tried to imagine himself doing any of these things now. Dancing in someone's living room? Playing piano? Spreading his arms wide on a pier like he didn't care who was watching? It all felt foreign, uncomfortable, not him, or was it? He pulled out his phone and called Tom. "You busy?" "Watching a game, why?" "Want to do something spontaneous?" There was a pause. "Who is this and what have you done with Ryan?" "I'm serious." "Let's go somewhere." "Do something. Right now." "Dude, it's like 9 at night on a Tuesday." "Exactly. That's the point." Another pause. "Okay, you're freaking me out." "What's going on?" "I'll explain later. Just meet me at Fletcher's bar in 20 minutes. Ryan hung up before Tom could argue. He looked at the wall of photos one more time, took a deep breath, and left the warehouse. He was going to try being spontaneous. Try being the person in those photos, even if it felt wrong, even if it felt forced. Fletcher's bar was a dive place downtown. Loud music, pool tables, the kind of place Ryan would normally never go to. But according to the journal, the old Ryan loved it here. So here he was. Tom showed up looking confused. "Okay, what's happening? You never want to go out on weeknights." "New policy," Ryan said, forcing confidence into his voice. "We're doing things differently now." They shot pool. Ryan was terrible at it. They ordered beers. Ryan didn't even really like beer. They talked to some random people at the next table. Ryan felt awkward the entire time, but he kept trying. Kept pushing himself to be more open, more relaxed, more like the person he'd been. After 2 hours, Tom pulled him aside. "All right, what's really going on?" "You're acting weird," Ryan sighed. "I'm trying to be someone I used to be." "The guy from the videos? The one with Natasha?" "Yeah." Tom looked at him seriously. "Ryan, you can't force this. You can't just decide to have a different personality." "Why not? That guy was happier than I am. He was living a better life." "Maybe," Tom said. "Or maybe you just think he was because you're seeing edited highlights. You're seeing the good moments. You're not seeing the struggles or the doubts or the regular boring days. Everyone looks better in photographs." Ryan hadn't thought about that, but he took risks. He did things. "I just go through the same routine every day." "And there's nothing wrong with routine," Tom said. "Look, I get it. You found out you had this whole other life you don't remember. That's heavy. But you can't spend your whole life trying to be someone you were. You need to figure out who you are now. What if I don't like who I am now? Then change. But change into who you want to be. Not who you think you should be. Not who someone else wants you to be. Who do you want to be?" Ryan went home that night and thought about Tom's question. Who did he want to be? He'd spent 2 weeks studying his old self like